So let people trickle in. Feel free to use the chat to introduce yourself and say where you're from. And yeah, this webinar is being recorded and we'll post it on the YouTube channel, so you'll have access to it in the future. Yeah, I'm really excited about this one. And this picture is supposed to be a ladybugs eating aphids, which is like a classic pest management, natural approach to, having to tackle pests. So this is supposed to be one of the, nice picture. I think it's on a narrow leaf milkweed too. So.
It's great. It's really great. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, and even in my garden, it's crazy. Like when I have aphids coming up, like on my kale and stuff, and even on like my mugwort randomly. But sure enough, like a few days later, all these ladybugs appear out of nowhere, and I was like, oh, cool, they're gonna come take care of it. It's crazy. It's really cool how nature works in that way.
I know it. I agree. I get so stoked. I mean, people think I'm crazy, but when I start to see aphids in my garden, I'm pumped because that means look who's right around the corner. It's our beneficiary. All right. This is so fun to see everybody.
Yeah, and see that they're coming in from all over the state.
I know. I love it. And it's like so many places that I've worked in gardens or met plants. So it's really fun.
It is pretty much all over. So we'll be getting going just a moment. It looks like we still have people rolling in through the doors here, but feel free to introduce yourself. As we go, we're going to have Q&A open. If you want to ask questions, we'll answer which ones we can during it. We'll if there's time at the end, we'll ask them live. And if not, in the follow-up email, we'll try and answer as many and give as many resources as possible. As Maya said, this is being recorded and will be available on YouTube afterwards. We may use the raise hand function to answer as part of an interactive piece, but we're not going to actually be answering questions that way throughout. So I think we're ready to get going. Thanks for coming to talk about bugs. I'm Anne-Marie. I'm the Horticulture Program Manager for CNPS. And Maya, do you want to introduce yourself?
I don't know. Yeah. And I'm Maya, and I'm the Horticulture Senior Program Coordinator at CNPS. So yeah, really excited to have you on, Suzanne.
And I think we're both big bug nerds as well as plant nerds. And we're so excited to have Suzanne with us. I think you're all going to learn a lot, and this well-rounded background of hers is going to give you a great way to really take a look at this good bugs, bad bugs idea. So Suzanne, we're going to go ahead and stop sharing and turn it over to you.
Okay, super. Okay. So, all right. So you all see the right screen, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, beautiful. All right, good.
Great.
I am so excited. Thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. And for your interest in learning about, how to manage pests naturally by encouraging beneficial insects in the garden. This is going to be a lot of fun. So I'm going to go through slides for probably a solid hour because I always like to pack in a lot of content, but then we'll leave time for your questions at the end. And what you're going to learn, I'm going to review what integrated pest management is for those that might not be familiar with it, but it's always the way I like to start. And then I'm going to review who many of the common good bugs are and other beneficial insects we see around the garden, and then how they are helping us and how to keep them around. So let's get started. So integrated pest management. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this term, but how I like to share is that through the lens of IPM, it allows us to address the cause. When we have a pest problem, through IPM, we are able to address the cause. So it's a decision-making process that uses science-based strategies, okay? And it allows us to look at the system as a whole. So here we're talking about pest problems outside or managing pests outside, but it also could be inside the house or a structure as well. And, you know, allows us to, you know, look at that system as a whole, as opposed to looking at simply just at the pest, okay? So, or the pest issue. And we begin by asking several questions. So, is the pest the problem, or is the pest showing me that something else is going on, such as the plant is stressed due to overwatering or an irrigation break or something? So sometimes pest problems are actually, a pest is a symptom of another problem that's happening. So that's why it's so important to kind of look a little deeper, take a deeper look. And then we ask ourselves if we could live with this problem or live with this pest, because sometimes a pest is not necessarily a problem. And then we want to determine what our threshold or tolerance of that pest is before we take action, or if we even need to take action. So oftentimes our threshold is much shorter or smaller or narrower than the plant's threshold. So just something to think about. So, and with IPM, pest identification is key, because if we can't identify the pest, we won't be able to successfully correct the problem or that pest problem. And then we also want to look at different ways for preventing the pest problems. So preventing a pest problem could look like planting all of our new plants into gopher baskets to prevent gophers from eating the roots of those plants. So that's an excellent prevention tool. So then when we need to take action to manage pest problems, the action steps in IPM are referred to as controls. So cultural controls, bolstering the health of the environment, mechanical or physical controls. These are the tools we use to manage those pest problems, such as hand pulling or mowing weeds, working with traps, and barriers for exclusion. And then biological controls. These are using living organisms to manage pests, which, by the way, this is what we're focusing on tonight. And then, of course, there's going to be the chemical controls. These are the pesticides. We're always going to use them as a last resort when we've exercised all the other options, and we're always going to use an eco-friendly product. All right. So IPM for beneficial insects. Proper identification is the first step. You know, unfortunately, many of the beneficial insects and spiders that we see get targeted as a pest and then are eliminated. So second, we want to set our garden up for success by planting the right plant in the right place and providing all that good, proper, healthy plant care. Third, we want to grow biodiversity, which is super important by growing a diverse assortment of flowering plants, different sizes and colors and shapes, help support an assortment of beneficials. And then reducing and avoiding pesticide usage, even the eco-friendly ones, because pesticides like neem, which is eco-friendly and great, can cause harm to our beneficials in the garden. So, all right. I prepared this really fun game for us. I know, don't panic. It's going to be short and sweet, but it's a lot of fun. It's called Squish or Don't Squish. So hopefully you all are ready. Okay, we're going to do a little practice. So what we're going to do is I'm going to ask you to find that raised hand button on your screen. It should be between the chat and the Q&A. And we have some options. We can click the thumbs up if we want to squish the insect, or we could do a raise hand if we want to squish it, or we could do the thumbs down if we don't want to squish it, or we don't raise a hand if we want to not squish it. So, and then we click that again to lower those hands and thumbs. You can also, you know, type in the chat, squish or don't squish. And Anne-Marie or Maya, I might ask you for some assistance because I can't really see all those fun details, but let's get started if everyone's ready. Okay, this is gonna be a lot of fun. All right. So we see this creepy crawler in the garden. Are we going to squish them? Are we squishing them? Or are we not squishing them? Squishing them, not squishing. Okay, a lot of us are squishing them. Gosh, I love this. I know. I see these creepy crawlers a lot and I get really freaked out. All right. All right, I love it. We have a lot of people, so I'm giving everyone a lot of time. All right, let's move on to the next one. All right, so, oh, this one's even creepier. We see this guy with these piercing mouth parts and these spines. Are we squishing him? Oh my gosh, I'm so squishing this guy. If I saw him in the garden, are we squishing him? Or raise our hand, or thumbs up or raised hand, we're squishing. Or we can type in the chat. What do you all think? Oh yeah, I know, definitely. Can you imagine crawling on your skin? Ooh, whew, I just got the chills thinking about that. All right. Okay, super. Let's move on to the next photo. All right, it's a little blurry. I'm so sorry. I take these pictures and it's tough, but this little like wormy guy was crawling on one of my plants. Full disclosure, flicked him off, was able to take the picture of him with the stick. So are we going to squish him or are we not going to squish him? Thumbs up or thumbs down? What do y'all think? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Yeah. We're going to squish. Some of us might not squish. Okay, super. Y'all are fantastic at this game. I love it. Okay, let's go to the next and final. Are we going to, look, this guy looks like he's from outer space. This looks like a sea anemone or some sea urchin. That's just so weird. This is like science fiction at its maximum. Are we squishing it? Are we squishing this? Woo, what is it? Is it even an insect? I don't even know. All right, I want to just, all right. I'm gonna give everyone another minute or a few seconds, really. All right, so are we ready? Let's move on. That was the game. So I want to thank you all for indulging me. I hope you thought it was as fun as I did. And guess what? All of those strange looking insects were our beneficial friends, our garden allies that we can see in our garden, most likely right now. Okay, so let's meet our garden friends. Can you believe it? And full disclosure, that one little guy, I didn't really flick him off. I mean, I kind of did, but I did save his life. I did not mean to hurt him. All right, so ladybugs or lady beetles or ladybird beetles, as they say over the pond, throughout Europe. There's over 450 species of ladybugs throughout North America. And they're pretty fun. I love them. I think we all know ladybugs very well. They have a lifespan of about 3 months or a year, depending on what time of the year they were born. So if they're born in the spring or summer, they'll live 3 months. If they were born in the fall, they will overwinter and finish out their life cycle throughout the year. So they can vary in color and also in patterns. So they might be all black with 2 red spots, or they might be all red or all orange or all black. They could be black with gray spots, gray with black spots, that kind of thing, kind of modeled, you know, almost like camouflage. So there's quite a few different patterns and colors that we see the lady beetles. And ladybugs are predators of small soft-bodied insects. So they are going to thrive on eating a lot of those aphids and white-flied nymphs and so forth. And both the adult and the larva have voracious appetites and can consume many, many aphids as well as other insects. So ladybugs can eat over 5,000 soft-bodied insects during their lifetime. That's a lot. Sometimes we might feel like we've got 5,000 aphids in our garden, like, you know, on our plants at one time, but we really don't. It just feels that way. And the adult lady beetles will only stick around if there's food. So only if food is present, they will stick around. But if not, they're going to take off. They're going to fly away in search of another group of an aphid infestation to feed on and then lay their eggs around. So just know that if you want to have ladybugs in your garden, it's really nice to also have aphids around and other food for them. We want to provide a nice habitat for them, growing a diversity of different species of plants, including trees, shrubs, and especially flowers. Okay, so we also want to include some like chunky arbor mulch or bark chips that are kind of sizable, as well as a few small branches or limbs that we've cut off of a tree during a pruning season, and kind of put them in an area, because the ladybugs like to rest and nest in chunky bark and also downed limbs and so forth. All right, this is the lady beetle larvae. So looks like a tiny alligator, and they're also going to vary in color as the adults do. Sometimes they're all black or all like that charcoal gray with black spots, or dark black with charcoal gray spots, or blotches or stripes of orange or kind of red. And they're going to feed for about 2 or 4 weeks before they pupate, which then they'll emerge as an adult lady beetle a few days after that. They can consume hundreds of aphids. I mean, hundreds. It's their favorite food. But again, they also will feed on other soft-bodied plant pests, such as scale insects, spider mites, insect eggs, whitefly nymphs, and so forth. So when we see these in the garden, we should be really, really happy. And then this is the pupal stage of the lady beetle. It looks like a little dome shape, kind of strange. And and this one up here in the picture on the right top corner, you almost can see the larvae starting to transform to that pupa, which is kind of cool. So I really like this photo. And they will be in this stage for a few days, anywhere from like 6 to 15 days, and they'll attach themselves to just about anything. I've seen them on the side of my pots, my planted pots. This picture on the right is a bamboo garden stake in one of my raised beds. And of course, the one on the left is just a plant in my garden. They're all around. So keep your eyes open. They're really, really cool. And then these are the ladybug eggs. So adult ladybugs will lay eggs in clusters of like 5 up to 30. Usually this is kind of what I see. This is really common. They look like golden yellow footballs placed up on their points. So starting in the spring through the summer months, a single adult female can lay more than 1,000 eggs. Wow, just think about that. So when you worry that you have too many aphids, trust me, that ladybug is going to be really excited to see all those aphids, and it's going to start laying eggs, and you're going to have larvae, and you're going to have a whole habitat. So the larvae, the eggs are going to hatch and emerge. The larvae will emerge within about 2 to 5 days as well. So have a look in your garden. You might see these today. All right. Green lacewing. So you might recognize the green lacewing as that clear-winged insect that flies around the porch light at night. I also see them fluttering around my garden like little fairies. They fly, they have an interesting flight pattern or habits. They feed on pollen and flower nectar and the honeydew that insects like aphids secrete. So they're actually quite beneficial on that side of, things, pollinating our plants and so forth. And depending on the weather conditions or the season, the adults can live 4 to 6 weeks. So much shorter lifespan than that ladybug. And this guy, remember him? How many of you wanted to squish him? This is one of the most exciting insects I see in the garden. When I see him, I just am like overjoyed. So, of course, this is the ladybug, the lacewing larvae. Other name, his nickname is aphid lion. This larvae is a predator, and they have an extreme carnivorous appetite. So they've been noted to be eating insects at a rate about 1 per minute. Whew, that's a lot. They are tiny. They are really tiny. So typically they're about the size of 2 aphids lined up front to back. They can be about 3/8 of an inch all the way up to about 1/2 an inch. But though they're tiny, you really can see them. It's remarkable how they just stand out once you kind of know what you're looking for. They have these spiny bodies and piercing mouth parts. And I believe it was University of Purdue years ago when I was preparing this program, did a study and watch the larvae going into a population of aphids, eating some aphids, hollowing them out and throwing the aphid skins on their back as camouflage to go in to eat more aphids. Can you believe that? It's wild. That is documented by a university. They love feasting on aphids, thrips, mites, mealybugs, whitefly nymphs, small caterpillars, insect eggs, and other soft-bodied pests. They will eat hundreds during their 2 to 3 week larval stage. So hundreds. So boy, they are a welcome friend in my garden. After their 2 to 3 weeks, they spin a spherical silken kind of white cocoon, and then they'll emerge 5 days later as an adult. Kind of cool. These are the lacewing eggs. How many of you have seen these in the garden? This is a treat when we see this. They're crazy. They're oval, white, pale green on about 1/4 of an inch slender stalk, which keeps the eggs suspended because the young larvae, once they hatch, they need to crawl down that stalk, and they have such a strong appetite. They're ready to start consuming the minute they are born. And if the other eggs were on that leaf, all laid similar to those ladybug eggs, the first one born would eat all the other eggs. So that's why that lacewing mama is really smart and has figured out, let's put these eggs out on this little slender stalk. So the mature lacewing will attach, these to plants throughout the garden that have aphids and other pests nearby. Okay, so look a little closer when you see an aphid infestation or another pest infestation. Take a little closer and see if you've got some lacewing eggs. The adults love flowers that are going to be in the carrot or aster family. So since the adult is a nectar feeder and pollen feeder, we want to make sure we have a lot of flowers around the garden, specifically around where we have pest problems or see excessive aphids that are going to be in that carrot or aster family. And what that looks like would be flowers such as that are like umbels or things that look like dill or cilantro or parsley, which I always let my dill, cilantro, and parsley go to flower specifically for my beneficial insects. And then other flowers that are like asters, goldenrod, sunflowers, things like that. They just love all of those flowers. And here's another really cool picture that I saw. This is a lacewing eggs among aphid infestation on a evening primrose flower stalk. So the flower stalk was almost like ick factor with aphids, but got to see several of the lacewing eggs. So kind of cool. They're very inconspicuous. All right, syrphid flies, also known as hoverflies or flower flies. These are not a bee or a wasp, though they have stripes, okay? They are a true fly. They will not sting, they will not swarm. They do not want to, attack you or anything. They are just out there, pollinating flowers. They dart around the garden like a helicopter. So you might see them kind of buzz over and kind of hover and then buzz over here and kind of hover and kind of dart and hover. So that's why they get their nickname hoverfly. So there's nearly 900 species of flower flies throughout North America. And they do range in sizes from pretty tiny, about 1/4 of an inch up to about 1/2 inch. And their colors also, though they're always kind of black with these yellow stripes, but they could be more muted or more brilliant. So you'll notice them now. Sometimes the stripes are closer together or broader and so forth. The adults feed on nectar and pollen, very important pollinators for the garden. And they live around the world except for Antarctica. And their most favorite flowers are sweet alyssum, yarrow, catmint or nepeta, or California native buckwheat, cilantro, and parsley. Now, sweet alyssum is on the invasive plant list. So if we have sweet alyssum in our garden, and it is not a native, but it is very helpful for some of our beneficials, we just want to make sure we keep it within the boundaries where it needs to be. All right. And here is that syrphid fly larvae. And This is so cool. And I'm so excited right now. Some friends that have seen this program before, after the last time I presented it, at their nursery, they had a discovery of some syrphid fly larvae on one of their plants. That's the picture on the right. And she emailed it me, texted to me and emailed it me. And she said, hey, is this what it, is this a syrphid fly larva? And I was like, yes. So the larvae are legless and worm-like shaped and varying color and patterns, but they all have a pale racing stripe down their back. So if you see this little guy and it has that pale racing stripe down its back, then you know it's a syrphid fly larvae. And they're going to range in, colors, kind of these green tones, as well as towards those khaki kind of tannish hues. All right. So they're going to vary in length, or in size, just like the adults. The larvae can be as tiny as 1/32 of an inch, all the way up to 1/2 an inch, depending upon their developmental stage and species. And they prey on scale insects, aphids, and thrips, and spider mites, and all of those pests that we find in the garden. So yes, this little guy on the bottom left corner, I had harvested some parsley to come in for a little culinary dish, and I'm about to start chopping, and lo and behold, I found this little syrphid fly larvae friend. Luckily did not make it to the chopping block of the program. I was able to relocate him outside. Very exciting. And here are some syrphid fly eggs. So the females lay these whitish gray oblong rice-like eggs that measure about 1 millimeter, very tiny. You'll see them here just tinier than those aphids, that picture on the right. Do you see them kind of tucked in there? It's just remarkable. And they will emerge as the larvae in just a few days. Their full entire life cycle is about 2 to 4 weeks, again, depending on the time of year and the weather conditions. But let me tell you, they absolutely love aphids. And my favorite time to go out for a hunt is at sundown or dusk. And I look for a population of aphids, and I can usually find the syrphid fly larvae and eggs on those plants. So the adult is she's very smart. She's always going to lay the eggs near a population of aphids for her young. All right. And this weirdo, okay, so many of you may have noticed that this mealybug destroyer larvae on the left was eating an aphid. So that was kind of a clue that it was a good bug. However, mealybug destroyers, which are so exciting for me, are predators of mealybugs, but they also are going to eat aphids and soft scale insects and spider mites and thrips and whitefly nymphs and other soft-bodied insects. But their most favorite is mealybugs. So the adults are very, very tiny. The adults are in the ladybug or lady beetle family. It is a ladybug, but it's very, very tiny, just about a sixth of an inch. 1/6 of an inch. But the larvae are going to be much larger. They can grow to be about 1/2 an inch, which is twice the size of an adult mealybug. Okay. They are fast feeding, highly mobile ladybug larvae that are extremely active. They are cruising around pretty fast. I've only seen the larvae in action. Personally, I've never seen the adult ladybug in action. So though I understand that lady beetle is also pretty fast, I will share the ladybug larvae, this mealybug destroyer larvae is very fast mover. And they can consume hundreds of mealybugs throughout their lifetime. I mean, they just can't get enough. It's like little popcorn treats right in their mouth. So both the larvae and the adult are predators and reduce the need of pesticides. Okay, so they do a tremendous job. The adults and the larvae both are going to feed on all stages of the mealybugs. And when there's no mealybugs available, they will eat all those other insects I mentioned, those aphids, those scale insects, those spider mites, the thrips, and so forth. The adult will lay over 400 eggs during her 2-month lifespan. And which the populations can increase quite well with that. And the mealybug destroyer larvae since it looks so much like a mealybug, it is able to sneak up on its prey with ease because those other mealybugs don't even see it. They just think, hey, there's a cousin of mine coming over. But unfortunately, since they're almost identical in appearance, this also means that mealybug destroyer larvae are targeted. They're targets of pesticide intended for the bugs that they feed on. So that's one little bummer. But if you have mealybugs, take a closer look and see if you see one that happens to be twice as big and moving around really fast, because then you know you are covered. All right, here's a picture in my garden. This is a discovery. I was so excited because I've talked about mealybug destroyer larvae for years, and then I finally got to see them. So you can see them side by side with the ladybug larvae. They're both cruising around eating aphids. The mealybug destroyer larvae is just slightly smaller than that ladybug larvae, but you can see them both right there. All right, and now this is when things get real crazy. We're going to talk about parasitoids or parasitic wasps specifically, because there's also parasitoid flies that are parasitoids and other critters out there, but this is going to be our parasitic wasps, and they are wasps, but don't freak out. This is not like, yellow jackets, though they're wasps. These are very, very tiny. In fact, almost so small we don't even recognize them. We think they're fungus gnats or something similar. But these wasps live part of their lives as parasites inside other insects. Totally crazy. So there are several hundred different species of these wasps. They are also cruising around pollinating our flowers. I specifically like to let my cilantro go to flower. And when you see lots of tiny, tiny little micro pollinators harvesting or enjoying those flowers of the cilantro, you can be pretty sure that these are some parasitic wasps that are out there pollinating or enjoying that nectar from those little flowers. So like I said, they're very, very tiny. They are not going to swarm us. They are not going to bite us. They're not going to sting us, all right? They don't want to bother us in any way, shape, or form, but they are very good at managing pests. So they can control aphid insects, scale insects, leaf miners in citrus and in vegetables, like our beet and spinach and chard crops, leaf hoppers, caterpillars, roaches, flies, beetles, whiteflies, even ticks. So the picture on the right, there's a parasitic wasp laying an egg inside a caterpillar. The picture on, that was the left. I may have misspoke. Picture on the right, I get very excited. Picture on the right is a tomato hornworm that thinks it has some nice little bling accessories, but these are all eggs. And when those eggs hatch, they're going to burrow in and devour that tomato hornworm. Here's another picture, a close-up photo of a wasp laying eggs inside of an aphid. So an illustration and a photo. And when the eggs hatch inside the aphid, larvae will consume the inside of that aphid, leaving an outer skin as a puffed up shell, then exiting through a perfectly round hole that it cuts to emerge as an adult wasp. So wild. The picture on the right, you see that they're these little puffed aphids. These are all called mummies, and all those little holes are the exit holes. This is where they got that idea for that movie Aliens with Sigourney Weaver, 1986. I just think it's wild. All right, soldier beetles. Soldier beetles are about 1/2 inch. They're one of the first to emerge in the spring. They like to cruise around, looking for things. They're related to fireflies, but they don't have that light producing organ. So you might recognize them to look very similar to a firefly. If you're from that part of the United States where we have fireflies, they enjoy flower nectar and pollen, as well as eating soft-bodied insects. But I like to say it's about, 50-50. They do really like to enjoy that flower nectar and pollen, and they're very good at pollinating our plants for us. But they love to eat insects such as small caterpillars and aphids, while doing no harm to the plants. A lot of times they are targeted as the pest, but they are not the pest. Soldier beetle larvae are going to also look like that little miniature mini alligator, similar to the ladybug larvae. And they're usually very dark in color, and they can grow to be about 3/4 of an inch. However, although the adult soldier beetles are very noticeable and oftentimes very abundant around our gardens, the larvae are rarely ever seen because they live in that soil, and they're in the soil out there just eating soil dwelling insects such as beetles, the eggs of beetles, the eggs of snails, and other garden pests that live below the ground. So soldier beetles are going to overwinter in the soil as a pupa and emerge in the early spring, as I mentioned, as being one of the first ones that emerge. And the females will also lay eggs in the soil. So in the fall or at the end of the summer, it's really nice not to disturb the soil too much, because a lot of our beneficials are going to be hibernating for the winter in that soil. Okay, dragonflies. I feel like a lot of times dragonflies are a little bit of that forgotten beneficial, but I absolutely love them. And since I live in an area that's surrounded by water, and I get very excited when I see them. They live in marshy areas, ponds, lakes, and creeks. They start as a tiny, tiny egg, the size of a period or a dot at the end of a sentence. If you're typing out, that's how tiny they are. The adults will scatter their eggs freely over waterways or tuck them into vegetation that is floating in water or in muddy stream bottoms. They will either hatch within a few weeks or overwinter before hatching. So from eggs, they hatch into a nymph and then into an adult dragonfly, which will live for several weeks. So in retrospect, the dragonfly adult has a very short lifespan. Sometimes the larvae can be in the waterways up to 2 years. So long time for the larvae, short time for the adult. So their feeding range, this is really cool. They will feed up to about 3 miles from their home, just cruising around this 3-mile radius. And they love to feed on mosquitoes, gnats, flies, and other small flying insects. Their front legs kind of are in a scooped form like a basketball. And as they're flying, they just kind of scoop up an insect and pop it in their mouth. They're extremely important and reduce the need for pesticides. However, because they are, so much of their lifespan is in the water, when we use pesticides that are not eco-friendly, that can impair water quality, we're actually also knocking back the populations of the dragonflies. So it's really important to only use eco-friendlies and as very minimally as possible. But if we do need to manage mosquito larvae, that is a problem in a lot of waterways, or maybe water features around our own property, like a trough or a rain barrel or a rain catchment system. Mosquito dunks and mosquito bits, which are a beneficial bacteria, BTI is the active. They have no adverse effects on dragonfly larvae or anything else that is untargeted in the waterways. All right, so now we're going to talk about garden spiders. All the spiders are predators, and they eat mainly insects, other spiders, and related arthropods. Many common garden spiders do not weave a web. So in this case, we're looking at the crab spider, not a web weaver, and the red-backed jumping spider here having a conversation with the ladybug. I think that's really cute. I just love that those two are kind of chilling. The jumping spiders are one of the largest and most commonly encountered spider that we see in the garden throughout North America. And both, as I mentioned, are non-web weavers. They will hang out at the base of flowers or at the base of plants to capture insects that might be walking by or resting on that surface. And so that's how they get to get their food, their meal for the day. Whereas the web weavers, and this beautiful banded garden spider that was quite big and kind of alarmed me when I noticed it, they are going to rely on their prey getting caught in their webs, the webs that they weave. So I will just share spiders, though some of us are afraid of them. I get that. They are the most beneficial insect, well, not an insect, but they are the most beneficial globally because we have spiders on every continent and they are eating insects and other things that are less desirable. And they really help us keep the balance. So I learned to have a tolerance and they are very welcome in my garden. All right, beneficial nematodes. So this is kind of weird. I'm not sure if everyone has heard of them or is familiar. They are becoming more, familiar. People are more aware of them, but they are microscopic worm-like organisms that naturally live in the soil and feed off of soil-dwelling larvae and other insects. So you can purchase them. When you purchase them, you'll receive several million in your little package, and we're going to follow those instructions and get them in the soil according to the package and the company they came from. And they are going to consume hundreds of soil-dwelling insects. I mean, we're talking lawn grubs, flea larvae, cutworms, weevils, fungus gnat larvae, termites, and so many others. There's 3 unique species of beneficial nematodes that we can buy commercially or, in the retail environment. And so we always want to make sure we get the correct species to prey on the pest or insect problem that we have. But let me tell you, they are not going to try to get on us. We can, we put them out in the meadow or on the lawn. They're going to go directly into the soil. They're like vampires. They don't like the sun. So we can walk on there without feeling like they're going to get on us or anything. That's not what their jam is. They want to be in the soil. And this picture on the right, which is a really common picture if you do an internet search, this is the nematodes attacking a fungus gnat larvae. So if you can imagine how tiny a fungus gnat is, then imagine how tiny that fungus gnat larvae is. And now you can see how tiny those nematodes are. Okay, incredible, incredible, super cool. And then we just want to remember that the bees and other pollinators are super important to us too. 1 out of every 3 bites of food we eat is dependent on a pollinator. And however, we often only think of bees as the important pollinator. Remember that butterflies, moths, flies, like those syrphid flies we just looked at, wasps, some beetles, and even some small mammals assist with this important task of pollinating. So just keep that in mind when we are out in the garden. So let's look at how we can invite these garden allies, how we can invite these friends. When we think about inviting the natural enemies, our beneficial insects and so forth, we want to think about inviting the 3 Ps. We want the predators, such as those ladybugs that consume insects as food to reduce the population of the bad bugs. The parasites or the parasitoids, such as those wasps that we looked at, that use the host pest as a nursery for their young, kind of crazy. And then the pollinators, such as our bees and butterflies and so forth, they fertilize the flowers to increase productivity of food crops and help increase our yields. So we support all of these beneficial garden friends by providing them with food. And the one thing they all have in common is that they love flowers. Though we associate the larvae as eating the garden pests, the adults require pollen and nectar from the flowers. Okay, so that's why planting a huge assortment of flowering plants in a variety of colors and shapes and sizes and heights and species, so that we can attract a variety of beneficial organisms. Okay, that's how it is. So we plant in clumps rather than single plants when possible to better attract our pollinators. But then we also want to make sure that we choose flowers that will flower. We choose plants that will flower at different times of the year, so that we have something to offer pretty much as soon as the temperature is warm in that February, March time of the year, all the way through our possible long summers that can go as far as to October. So we always want something in bloom and something to offer pollen and nectar to our beneficials whenever possible. And we always want to avoid using pesticides. So we are going to increase, we are going to plant flowers that look like daisies or sunflower, because remember, though we might be seeing one flower here, this one daisy-like flower, the Coreopsis or the Rudbeckia, it's the button in the middle. Those are actually all the tiny flowers that our little guys are visiting. And since so many of our beneficials are tiny, we want to focus on offering them an assortment of tiny flowers. And then we also want to bring in flowers that grow in clusters of tiny flowers, such as the yarrow, our native buckwheat, the cilantro flowers, and ceanothus, for example. And again, because so many of our beneficials are tiny. And then how do we find resources to learn more about plants for our beneficial friends? Well, the Our Water, Our World website has a couple of great resources that you can check out, specifically the Healthy Gardens fact sheet. If you go to ourwaterourworld.org, our local UC Master Gardeners are going to have great resources on their websites. And I think maybe the best of all, of course, also our sponsor, our host this afternoon, California Plant Society, but Calscapes, their new database of finding plants that are going to thrive in your garden that are native and are going to be regionally appropriate. And then let's not forget about our important these important garden friends. These allies are going to also do a tremendous service for us. So in building an owl box to invite owls, or inviting other raptors to our garden to manage critters such as rodents and gophers and so forth. But side note, we always want to avoid using those rodenticides, because those rodenticides are deadly to our raptors and other critters that might be in our gardens. We also want to attract birds, because many species of birds, such as our songbirds and even hummingbirds, are going to be eating insects throughout their, when they're feeding their young, throughout their breeding time. And then the bats that we have, we might not even notice because we're in at night, but we have bats throughout the state of California, and they are also doing us a tremendous service by eating hundreds of pests, including those mosquitoes at night. And they just keep in mind that they need to eat more than their body weight in food every single night. So they're really reducing those nighttime pests that fly around. Our western fence lizards, our tree frogs also are doing a great job devouring pests, insects throughout the garden. So how do we set our garden up for success? Well, we're going to provide sustainable garden practices, maintaining our garden in natural ways to ensure the soil, the air, and the water stay healthy, clean, and free from poisons. We're going to always plant the right plant in the right place, ensuring that the plants you choose are perfectly matched to the conditions of your garden. We're going to grow biodiversity by planting a variety of flowering species. We're going to also plant some trees that flower and shrubs, but favoring those perennials. And then we're going to, well, let's not forget the annuals too. Some annuals are really important, like that cilantro I keep talking about. But let's also let flowering plants complete their life cycle. Let's let them, let's stop deadheading at a certain period and let them complete their life cycle. Let them go to seed, because a lot of the ecology of the garden will benefit, especially those birds. Mulch is your friend, okay? Let's keep in mind that mulch is your friend. We want to use a chunky arbor mulch to provide shelter for many of the beneficial insects, and it also reduces water evaporation, allowing us to water our gardens less frequently. But we always want to leave areas of the garden uncultivated and natural, and where the ground is exposed for the ground nesting bees. We are going to water deeply and less often in accordance with the plant's needs. This is a tough one because most people overwater their plants. This one is just a really hard one to teach folks. We always want to encourage broad, deep root systems, and how we grow broad, deep root systems is with irrigation. All right. So we're always going to bring the irrigation out at that drip line of the plant as the plant grows, as it's becoming established. And we're going to water deeper and deeper as that plant gets bigger, the root zone gets bigger, and we want to drive those roots down deeper. And then as the plant becomes more established, we reduce the frequency of watering. We're not going to be watering as often. We're going to let that soil dry out a few inches before we water again. And of course, depending on the plant's needs once established, and then the conditions of the garden, because every garden is different. How do we create a happy habitat? We're going to create a place in our garden for beneficials and pollinators to stop and refuel as they travel through urban, suburban, and wildland areas. Okay, so we do this by providing them food. You know, plants provide basic food for our beneficial insects and our pollinators in the form of, and our birds and the wildlife that visits our gardens in the form of seeds and berries and nuts and fruits and nectars and sap and pollen and foliage. And yeah, foliage. Remember, our butterflies have caterpillars, and caterpillars' #1 job is just to eat foliage. And guess what? That's okay. The plants have adapted to it and they're not going to die. So that's what's so cool. We are going to let foliage get eaten by some caterpillars because they turn into really important pollinators. And then we're going to provide places and resources for beneficial insects. They need these resources to nourish them, and resources to raise their young and reproduce and to rest. So ideal locations are places where predators have a hard time invading them. So that's why we're looking at trees and some, shrubs, and having some, tree limbs that we pruned off, or some snags or thickets, kind of in areas where they can kind of, take some coverage and be protected. And we also want to include areas of the garden where maybe some things can nest and repopulate themselves. Okay, so when those ladybug eggs are on some plants, we want to make sure that pets or kids aren't playing kickball in that area and maybe knocking them off or squishing them by accident. We want to always provide, or when possible, a sunny and safe area for the ladybugs and for bees and butterflies and other beneficial insects, because they like sunny spots to warm up. And then again, areas that are relatively undisturbed. And then water. Water is a really important part. And this is a photo of a glazed saucer that I had, and I put some garden pebbles in it, and I fill it halfway with water. And during the very warm days of summer, yes, there are many pollinators in all shapes and sizes that come and drink from this water. It is really a joy to see that bees, as tiny as they are, can come and drink from the watering station that I've prepared for them. And that water evaporates out, and I'm refilling it every day, so I don't need to worry about breeding mosquitoes either. But bird baths are also really nice for the birds for frolicking and bathing as well. And then, as I mentioned, some of our beneficials and garden allies will also need places to take shelter if bad weather comes in quickly. They also would like places to hide, because they know oftentimes that they are prey. And so forth. But okay, we want to avoid pesticides. We were taught that going for a pesticide is typically the first line of defense. But as a professional garden educator and someone that's worked in the garden industry, both in gardens professionally and in retail nursery environments, it's a very rare occasion we use pesticides. So truth be told, the professionals don't use pesticides as often as maybe other people. I'm not sure how to say that, but pesticides won't have a long-lasting solution to the problem if the cause is not addressed. So if the conditions continue to favor the pest or the disease, then the pesticide will only offer a brief respite. Pesticides don't solve the pest problem, okay? They only reduce that pest for a short amount of time. We still have to address the cause. And unfortunately, even eco-friendly pesticides will reduce beneficial insect populations. So again, very rare occasion where we actually need to use a pesticide. And there are times we need to use them, but very rare. And when we do need to use the pesticide, we always want to use them as a last resort when we've exercised all those other options. We want to always choose the eco-friendly products and less toxic products. We only want to target that pest. We are not spraying down the whole area. We are going to always apply that pesticide according to the label so that we can apply it safely and accurately and exactly how it's intended to be used. We're always going to wear PPE to protect ourselves because yes, even neem oil, we can have a dermal reaction, okay? So even though these are all eco-friendly products we're talking about, there's still pesticides designed to kill something. And then we really want to understand our unintended, the unintended consequences. We want to understand those risks so that we can avoid any anything that we didn't want to do. All right. And we absolutely want to avoid using products that contain neonicotinoids on the label. So also known as neonics. This is a group of chemicals that's most widely used insecticide throughout the world, although some countries have banned them, thankfully. Neonics are systemic. So that means this chemical it invades the plant's vascular system, moving through that vascular system and the tissue and even the nectar and the pollen. It targets, the target pests are often sucking insects like aphids or beetles, but the chemicals also harm honeybees, bumblebees, any of our native bees that might be visiting the flowers, other pollinators like butterflies and so forth. Very problematic. They threaten the biodiversity and interrupt the natural food web that harms non-targeted wildlife and insects. Some neonics harm beneficial insects, the natural enemies that would otherwise be keeping the balance of the good bug, bad bugs in check. So when we use these, we're actually increasing the pest problems, okay? So always read the label, always understand what that active ingredient is, its mode of action, and that it's something that you absolutely do want to bring into your garden and use. So something to keep in mind is that some pests are seasonal to be expected, such as our aphids. Like I said at the beginning, I get really excited when I see aphids because pests like aphids are food for beneficials, which keeps a healthy balance. We may need to reevaluate the thresholds of our tolerance. Okay, so let's just keep that in mind. An infestation of a pest can be a clue that something's not working or that plant is stressed out. So we always want to address that cause. So that's where we get back to that IPM, that list of IPM, strategies. So something we want to keep in mind is how much damage can you versus the plant or the environment tolerate before action is needed. So oftentimes we're the ones that are like a little like freaked out. Oh my gosh, I got to do something with this when actually it's totally fine. I mean, not always. There are times we have to use pesticides. Don't get me wrong, but I feel like sometimes we overdo it. And sadly, beneficial insects get targeted, unfortunately. So that's why proper identification is so important. If we're not able to identify the pest, then we'll have a difficult time solving the problem. We also want to understand that pest so we can understand its life cycle, because sometimes we'll target our action to manage that pest when it's in a larval stage or when it's hibernating in the soil or when it's an adult. It's always different. And then we also want to understand if that pest's natural enemies, if it's the beneficial garden allies, if they are present. So who are they and are they around? Yeah, then we can decide from there. So I want to go through a couple lookalikes because this is why pest identification is so challenging and we always want to be 200% sure, because even I get duped, and before we can make a decision, we need to know what we're up against. So this is the mealybug destroyer adult that feeds on mealybugs. This is a flea beetle that feeds on foliage and seedlings and leafy greens. This is the good bug. This is the bad bug. Look how similar they look, and they're about the same size. All right, so here we have a damselfly that preys on a wide variety of small insects, and here we have a leaf-footed bug that is a pest for tomatoes and pomegranates. Good bug, bad bug. They do look very similar. All right, here we have a couple of weird things going on that might be difficult to see. This is a ladybug pupa. The larvae and the adult ladybugs feed on pest insects. This is soft scale insect. This is a pest of many trees and shrubs. Good bug, bad bug. All right. Some online resources that are going to help you at pest identification. Of course, we have some support on the Our Water, Our World website. University of California's statewide IPM program, their website is amazing. If you can identify the plant, then the UC IPM website will help you identify if it's a pest or not. Through process of elimination and other key components of their website, you can identify what the pests of those plants are and what you have, if you're looking at a pest or not. And a resource I use regularly is Bug Guide, bugguide.net. I will, it's a really cool website. Check it out if you're not familiar with it. I will send them pictures of an insect in question. And it's really within 30 minutes that I get an answer, and it's really amazing. And then of course, if we want some more support around the pesticides we use, even the eco-friendlies, the National Pesticide Information Center is amazing. It's very user-friendly. It has sound science-based information that can really help you understand how the active ingredients work, what their toxicity levels are, and the mode of actions and so forth. Very helpful resource. And then of course, the University of California, UCIPM, has this really cool bee precaution pesticide rating on their website that helps us identify how the pesticides we use, even the eco-friendlies, what their rating is in relationship to our beneficials. And in close, I'd like to share a quote. When we try to pick out anything by itself, we find it hitched to everything else in the universe. Just love this quote. And yes, that's a syrphid fly that landed on my husband's thumb so I could take a picture of him. And I just like to thank you for joining us. I really appreciate your time and attention. And if questions come up later, you can always reach out to this awesome team that's hosting us tonight. But you can also reach out to me. I'm Suzanne at plantharmony.org, and I invite you to check out my Instagram channel and yeah, my website as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. That was ridiculously beneficial.
Yeah, I know we heard beneficial a lot, so it's great to keep doing. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
that was a great talk. Yeah,
Good,
and we'll
thank
be
you.
sure to follow up with resources and your website and your email for folks to reach out as well.
And there were a
Since we're
lot of questions, but I think most of them were being answered as we went, and we
Oh,
can
cool.
try and throw some resources into that follow-up.
And
email as well.
do you all have that 10 most wanted good bugs in the garden, that brochure? I can email it, the PDF to you all, and you can have it on your, as a resource.
Yeah.
Because that one's really cool. It's a popular one among the Our Water, Our World program, people, master gardeners and so forth. So it's out there. A lot of people, I even see some park and rec people when they're tabling, they have it out. So I'll send you the PDF.
Yeah, that would be great.
Fabulous. And for those of you who were asking, because there were a couple of them in different ways, you now actually have her email right here. So, and you should be able to reach my or I through CNPS. We appreciate you, Suzanne, and we'll be in touch soon with all of you. Thanks. Good night.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.